Well, there's no coming back from this. When Bakari Sellers appeared on The View, he took a jab at Ben Shapiro, throwing shade in a way that got Whoopi and the audience clapping, but fast forward a couple of months, and Sellers found himself face-to-face with Shapiro on Bill Maher's panel. Let's just say things didn't go as smoothly for him this time. Bill and Ben effectively dismantled his argument piece by piece, leaving everyone stunned, including him. And today we're covering this epic showdown that you won't believe what Bakari responded with when he ran out of talking points. As always, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos just like this.
It's fear, it's grievance, it's all of these things, and it just permeates itself and it manifests itself in hate. And the problem is that they have ads that play before and ads that play after. And you have these individuals, the Clay Travises of the world, the Ben Shapiros of the world, these people who don't necessarily have the intellect to have honest discussions, but but yet they're able to become millionaires because they're actually just circulating and promulgating this fear.
That's CNN's finest, Bakari Sellers, who in May of last year was calling Ben Shapiro a person who lacks the intellect to have honest discussions, but managed to make millions in quite a bold statement, especially coming from someone representing a network that seems to be struggling with its own credibility. Let's not forget, this is the same CNN that spent years pushing narratives that didn't quite hold true, and as a result, their viewership has tanked and people mostly watch it to see how Scott Jennings schools their woke pundits these days. A couple months after this episode, Bakari shared his panel with Ben and Bill on Bill Maher's show, and let me show you what this sight was to see.
About systemic racism, and most times
has it gotten worse since 1960?
Yes, actually.
Systemic racism has gotten worse since Jim Crow.
Yes. So you want me to give you a stat? Black home ownership today is less than it was pre-Fair Housing Act of 1968. But let me also talk about the fact that
being the welfare state.
Let me also tell you this. A lot of times when we talk about racism, we only talk about the fact when somebody calls you. But very rarely do we talk about the systems of injustice and oppression we have in this country. Where I'm from, Denmark, South Carolina, you don't have clean water, right? I live in a food desert, or grew up in a food desert, where you can't go a mile or two and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. The schools are falling apart. The infrastructure is eroding.
Bakari, is your life as a black man better or worse than it would have been if you had been born in 1920 in the United States?
Well, all you have to do is ask my father, who literally was shot in the Orangeburg Massacre, right? Who helped found SNCC, who marched with Marion Barry and Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King, and the list goes on and on and on. And he will tell you today that he feels like this country's at 1954.
You know what's really funny and sad as a South Carolinian myself? Bakari was actually a member of South Carolina's House of Representatives between 2006 and 2014, so why hasn't he done something to improve the dire living conditions that he's describing? And by the way, it's pretty alright here. It's almost like he's forgotten his own record, or hopes maybe that we have. This reminds me of Kamala Harris. Remember a few months ago when she went on and on about how terrible the economy was? Well, I hate to be that guy, but you've held positions of power where you could have actually done something. Wow! Complaining after the fact just doesn't feel right. It feels disingenuous and downright hypocritical. You don't get to play the blame game when you have a front row seat and toolkit to make changes. Seeing this, Maher decided to step in and did not hold back.
But that doesn't mean it is. Well, you said he feels that way. That's ridiculous. It is.
I think the ridiculous notion is for either one of you all to have the audacity to believe that you understand what the experience is to be.
I have to object to that.
But you just said
I cannot talk about it because I am not part of a group. I am a sentient human being. You're right. There's two ways you cannot understand something. One is to be too far from it. We're too far from it. We can't see like you can. One is to be too close to something. And then sometimes you can't see it accurately either.
Exactly. Just because someone doesn't share your skin color does not mean their opinion is any less valid or worth hearing. We've reached a point where the left has turned identity politics into a sport, and apparently they're the ones deciding whose voice gets to matter. Think about the double standards at play here. They'll champion someone's voice as long as it aligns with their agenda, but the second it doesn't, that person is suddenly irrelevant or doesn't understand the issues that they're talking about. By the way, I've noticed you haven't liked the video or subscribed to the channel yet, so what are you waiting for? Now, this selective support doesn't promote real progress or any understanding. Instead, it creates echo chambers where only certain viewpoints are allowed. What's even worse is silencing voices that could bring fresh perspectives or challenging flawed assumptions. But Bakari wasn't here to reason with the rest of the panel and had an agenda to push.
For you to discount my father's experience and say
I'm not discounting it.
And to say it was silly.
I'm not. No, he was shot.
No
Were
shit.
you shot?
No, but he's still alive. Like, he's
Okay.
right here. Like,
Right, but the idea that if I were to say to you, as a Jew, that the experience of Jews in the United States today is worse than the experience of Jews in Europe in 1939, I would not be stating accurately.
Correct.
It's not true.
That's
and
right.
it's also not true to say that the experience of black people in America in 2024 is worse on a general level than the experience of black men in 1954 in Alabama. That's just crazy.
But I mean, I think that's also, I also think that that's decently intellectually honest.
You know you lost when Bill's audience is clapping for Ben Shapiro of all people. But Ben is spot on. Bakari's approach does little more than dismiss the progress we've made as a nation since the era of Jim Crow. Instead of recognizing how far we've come, he chooses to fixate on the problems of the past. While it's essential to acknowledge history, I agree, constantly dwelling on it without considering how to move forward is counterproductive. What we need is a forward-thinking mindset, one that builds on progress that we've achieved and focuses on solutions for a better future. For instance, Morgan Freeman, who has lived throughout that era and witnessed the struggles firsthand, stressed the importance of looking ahead instead of being trapped in a narrative of victimhood. I think Bakari would do well if he took a page out of Freeman's book. By the way, a very successful man who's gotten past all of these boundaries.
I think that's genuinely intellectually dishonest, because when we go through the litany of not just imagine. So, for example, one of my major political issues is African American female mortality, right? If you want to talk about structural racism, did you know, I'm sure you do, but black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than white women.
That's also true in Europe, by the way.
But we're talking about the United States of
I know,
America.
but the problem is you have to have a control.
But we do have a control.
Well, no, your
we're talking
statistical
about,
control.
And so tell me why that is.
Okay, the answer is because black people in the United States have a lower household income, median household income, which means they typically go to hospitals.
I would call bullshit because it actually crosses across socioeconomic lines. So you can be my wife who almost died during childbirth. You can be Serena Williams who almost died during childbirth.
So what's your answer?
Because actually,
white doctors are racist?
No, but there actually is implicit bias in our healthcare delivery system, and there have been medical studies that show that people respond to the pain of black women differently than they respond to the pain of white women.
Yeah, I believe that.
That literally is a fact.
There are many, many confounds when it comes to these particular issues. And unless you remove the statistical confounds, you end up with trying to blame vague, shadowy figures like implicit bias, which are innately, insanely difficult, if not impossible, to measure.
I don't know what he just said.
Ben was trying to explain to him that there are so many confounding variables in the statistics that he was throwing around that measuring them would be really hard, especially since to reach these meaningful conclusions, you need to deal with constant and clear, reliable data. And I doubt that Bakari didn't understand it, he just didn't have a comeback, so no argument could hold up against the knockout Ben delivered in that moment. This exchange is a prime example of what happens when surface-level talking points are challenged with real logic and depth. Many of these so-called woke pundits thrive on repeating headlines and cherry-picked stats. But it's one thing to make bold claims or quote flashy numbers, and a whole nother to back them up when the conversation goes deeper. I'd love to know your thoughts here, so let's get the conversation rolling in the comments down below. And by the way, you want your friends to stay in the loop, please share the video with them. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.